Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to have you with us again for this webinar titled Technology and Cybersecurity for NGOs, Opportunities and Challenge in the Digital Era. This session is organized in collaboration with Dianova International, Last Man for D, and PurePoint International, and we are so grateful for this collective effort. Our conversation today focuses on holistic security, understanding safety as an interconnected system that includes digital, physical, emotional, psychological, and community dimension. Throughout the session, we will explore what holistic security means in practice and why it should guide our work. We will look also at how technology facilitates gender-based violence, what women, NGOs, and community can do to counter these risks. We will also touch on digital hygiene, the ways online abuse amplifies physical, emotional, and economic harm, and the structural gaps that persist, including the lack of female representation in technology design and insufficient collaboration among governments, civil society, and the private sector. Before we begin, please note that this session will be recorded and we have simultaneous interpretation available in English and Spanish. So please choose the language channel that best supports your participation and feel free to write as well in the chat in English and Spanish, the best language that suits you. We are honored to have with us today Magnus Harrison and Jessica Robinson, whose expertise and leadership are deeply valuable for this discussion. We sincerely thank them for sharing their time and knowledge with us. To start engaging with one another, you will soon receive 2 introductory questions in the chat. Where are you joining us from? And 2, what is your biggest security concern at the moment? And what topic would you like to learn more about today? And now it's my pleasure to hand over to our distinguished moderator, Magnus Harrison, founder and CEO of Last Man for D. Magnus, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gisela, for this kind introduction, and welcome everybody. And I'm delighted to be here. And as somebody who actually has deployed technology for some time, we're very aware of what can happen in particular space of today. But I am here to really learn a whole lot more from Jessica, my good friend, and our speaker. Allow me to introduce Jessica to you. She is a leading voice in global movement that's changing how we think about safety and security. With almost 20 years of experience guiding major companies and startups through security changes, she combines strategic skill, emotional awareness, and forward-thinking vision in everything she does. As the world's first holistic chief security officer, Jessica is more than a cybersecurity and technology expert. She helps leaders, teams, and organizations create security programs that support both people and performance. Through her company, PurePoint International, she connects cybersecurity, AI governance, and human awareness, helping clients shift from fear-based security to cultures built on trust, resilience, and freedom. Welcome, Jessica. And I want to start by asking you to define holistic security and why is it essential when addressing threats faced by women in the global South. Floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Manaz. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Giselle, for having us here today. And of course, thank you for Manaz for your leadership and your mentorship in this work of not only just civil society, but of course, the work of supporting the safety of women and girls across the world, and particularly with your specific work with Last Mile 4D. And with the focus of holistic security, for me, it really is a blend of understanding that, yes, digital security is important. Yes, physical security is important, but so is emotional, psychological, community safety, as well, and other areas of security. It really is this understanding that to focus on security, particularly for humans, that we have to focus on a human-centered approach to security versus what many focus on today, which is a technology-centered approach to security. And don't get me wrong, I think a technology-centered approach certainly works for certain environments, but that's not going to be the approach that's going to stop gender-based violence against women and girls. So we really have to adopt something, a different approach, and an approach that I call a more feminine approach to security. And I find that this has been very much received by people across the world to be able to best support them where they are. And I also know that people, depending on the type of work that they do, have very much adopted this way of thinking about security to be able to best serve their community. And I imagine also many of you here have done that as well, to be able to support the safety and security of your community.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, Jessica. That's very excellent explanation for us to really, for everybody on board as well, to hear and learn that where are we going with our conversation. So tell us, what are some of the most common ways technology is being used to facilitate gender-based violence, and how can women protect themselves? Could you unbundle these terminologies for us with real examples of what should CSOs be doing, looking out for to counter these kinds of attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. If we were having this conversation 20 years ago, and we were talking about violence against women, a lot of it would be specific to physical violence against women, doing things that, particularly if a woman is the first in her community or perhaps her country to do something, that there would be attacks on her reputation and her credibility. But now we're seeing what is generally being called technology facilitated or enabled violence against women. And so that's where we're seeing doxing, which I know many of you are probably very familiar with. That's when personal information about an individual is taken and it is put online, which means that health information about an individual could be put online, information related to work or about that individual's work is put online. And it's done for harassment purposes. So with social media and with all of the various channels that are online, we have seen threats that come on that are visible online that are directed towards many women. There's intimate partner violence as well. So that violence against women being a physical threat to the body has evolved to now violence taking place online, where people are willing to take images, whether they're real or not, and put them online. Of that is seen as a form of revenge porn, or is a form of what is being called deep fakes. If you're familiar with that terminology, it's something that has we've been using it for the past, let's say, particularly 5 to 7 years. A deep fake is when you have particularly a video or an image. But even within the video, there's a likeness not only in the video, but the voice as well of an individual. And it could appear as if a person is saying something or doing something that isn't true. And it has gotten to the point where these types of images are very easily accessible for people to not only create, but of course to disseminate. And so there has to be a lot of education around this, just so the women themselves that tend to be victims of this know exactly what to do when it happens. But also there needs to be more education around this so that there's not only a stop to the behavior or a decrease in behavior, but also so that law enforcement knows how to better respond to these types of things as well. But to be able to support any type of challenge or any crimes or penalties that could come against someone for doing these types of acts. And so, other things that happen are tracking and surveillance. There are a number of different apps out there that people use not only for within their families to be able to support their children and wanting to be online, or to be able to track their children with their children's consent in many cases. But these same tools can be used to cause harm with people as well. So it's very important that people are aware of who has access to their devices, that they actually have a lock on their device so no one can access it, and that they are starting to have a strong confidence in how to protect themselves both online and offline.
Thank you. That's really scary to hear that how awful things have become. Now, do you see that actually the laws or the law enforcement has come along with the changes that we see happening in the cyberspace? And are there new laws and are there other issues related to compliance or related to laws changing that the civil society needs to know about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that question because I know that this can sometimes be a bit controversial because at the end of the day, and there may not be a lot of people into civil society that always see law enforcement as a partner for them, right? And I think that a lot of times that they're an obstacle. But the reality also is that there are different laws that are being passed that can best support not only women, but if anything, data privacy laws because that has been a huge ripple effect around the world, particularly after 2018 with the European data protection regulation. So, if anything, there is increased protection of data. And that protection of data extends to you as a human being because that means your data is protected. So when there's a violation of that data and there is a law in a country that protects you, then you have a right to be able to use that law to protect yourself. And I think it's really important that people are aware of that so that you know what your rights are. At the end of the day, privacy is a basic human right. And so when someone is taking your information or accessing your information without your permission, particularly if it's if it's in relation to a large organization, let's say someone who may have healthcare information on you or another maybe an employer or a former employer, and someone gains access to that information, that is something that you can be protected from. So knowing what you have access to is really important from that perspective. Also, as an NGO, it's important for you to also have an understanding of what's your responsibility to protect as well, but also what your rights are to be able to use certain information to support and protect your community. The challenge of this can be with, I think this is across the board with intimate partners when they gain access to your phone or they gain access to other information about you. If they're using any type of fake images about you and trying to perpetuate that in either in real life or online, that is where it becomes a bit more challenging. But there are more and more laws coming on the books to be able to help support and protect individuals that have these crimes against them. And so I think that there's movement here. I don't think it's happening fast enough, but there is movement. And I think every part of the world is different. Every country is different, right? So, you within a certain part of the world, you most likely will have more access to a data privacy law than you may have of someone actually taking your own personal information and doing something with it. But nonetheless, that too can still be very helpful.
I just read this morning about this agreement that the president of Kenya signed with the U.S. government about the agreeing to give access for the health information of the Kenyan residents, Kenyan citizens, to the U.S. And that was extremely shocking. So, are there more per se global possibilities to not let such an action take place in a way that the leader of the country, and I understand that the U.S. government is actually pressing on that. This is their strategy of the new global health strategy is this to basically do bilateral and so on. So since I do work in Kenya, I was very surprised to see that, oh my God, every data that's there is accessible by U.S. government. So are there attempts by the UN, by the organizations beyond just individual governments that that we need to learn something about it? What are they doing in that space?
Yeah, I think this is interesting, and I think that for every situation it is different, and it does need to be governed by an agreement. These are basically agreements that support the transfer of data across borders, but it also needs to stand up legally. So if this is happening, then the question it really is what's going on and why does another country need all of this data and how exactly is it going to be used? And I think that this is a good example. I mean, it could. I'm not specifically familiar with this case, so it could be perfectly, be used in a completely legitimate way. But in many cases, one of the things that I know continues to be a concern is the transparency of how data is used, and ensuring that that transparency is happening on a continual basis. But also, the continued challenge to focus on and supporting human rights, right? Because at the end of the day, any data can be used against anyone, eventually, perhaps taking away their right. And so, as a human, so it's really important that this data and any data that's shared is supporting all, the whole of everyone, essentially, but also that at the end of the day, security and privacy continue to remain a strong focus. And I think that when it comes to government, when it comes to a lot of the things that government doesn't say, there, I know that there tends to still be a lot of distrust, right? Because it's about the use of that data. And I think in this case, it's a bilateral agreement. But even with, we've seen recently the UN Convention on the Global Convention on Cybercrime, which is asking member nations of the UN to take a stronger stance against cybercrime that's taking place. But of course, one of the challenges to that is the fact that it's still questionable about how each country would actually implement this and do it in a way that actually supports their citizens and doesn't harm them. And I think that lack of transparency creates distrust. And I think that distrust eventually, causes the questioning of how data or how implementation for the protection of data can be utilized. So I think that there needs to be just an increased explanation and from the government around how they're using data and how they and how basically how they're using data.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. You have spoken about the intersection of offline and online violence. Can you explain how digital abuse amplifies physical, emotional, and economic harm?
Yes, yeah. So this is so pervasive. I think it's easy for someone to think that, okay, there's been an incident with someone online. Let's say a video was made and placed on YouTube about an individual that says something about this individual that's completely untrue, right? Or uses their likeness in a way that is not true. And then for anyone to think that that wouldn't cause any type of emotional or psychological harm, particularly depending on if this video has been made aware or put out in, let's say, a religious community of this individual, if this or any community that their work community. And so I think the biggest challenge is how to look at this in a holistic way where someone is getting and seeking support for security and while also them receiving support emotionally for emotional security and also psychological security. I think this has to be addressed as a whole versus separately. And when we talk about economic security, if something does happen that's in the workplace or even within someone's work community, their living community, all of this can have economic harm. I was working with an individual where this type of incident happened. A video was put online about her. And by the time she and I were speaking, she was so upset. She was crying and she could barely speak. And so we had to just simply stop just so that she could emotionally take a breath. And that so psychologically, we could literally have a conversation about next steps. And so we had to take care of that first before we could even address the actual security concern. And then she had to move from her neighborhood, and she ended up moving to another neighborhood that was a couple hours away simply because it was safer for her and her husband. And you can imagine the economic challenge that cost her, needing to move simply because of a video that was not real was posted online and everyone in her community thought it was real. And this is this is the true impact of something like this happening, particularly in cultures where there can be a lot of let's say kind of stigmas around certain topics. And once someone is associated with a particular topic within that community, then that causes so much harm that that individual may not be able to stay there any longer. And I think that individuals that take these actions, in some ways, they know what they're doing. But at the end of the day, we absolutely have to find a way to limit this type of impact, because no one deserves that, right? And I think at the end of the day, taking a holistic approach to security is the only way that we can truly support someone in this type of situation, and to be able to help them find some sense of wholeness as they eventually go to create a new life, which is what she had to do. So,
Wow.
and then you can also think about the impact to her relationship with her husband. That too was also very challenging. The fact that, she had to do everything she could to get him to believe her, and that video was not real. And then he had to move with her 2 hours away. And so it's, all of this can be extremely, extremely challenging and damaging, particularly if you're living with extended family, maybe your parents or you have children. All of this just completely can exasperate an individual. And that's why that holistic approach is so important.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm getting some questions from the audience.
Yes.
So let me tell you, they want to know what concrete cybersecurity measures are there for NGOs that they can put in place today to actively protect women and girls from digital abuse and data-driven gender-based violence.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So let's start with communications tools. One of the things that I know many people love to use is WhatsApp. So I'll be the first to tell you, or maybe hopefully the last to tell you, to stop using WhatsApp. I know that this is a huge tool that people use internationally to communicate across borders, but it isn't secure. It has been that way for a number of years now. And I had a couple of incidents earlier this year where I was working with organizations and there was a breach of information, or someone came into one of their groups. And this was a civil society organization. Someone was able to get into one of their group chats and then start spamming everyone in that chat. Alternatives I would recommend are Telegram or Threema. Both of those should be ones that you can use internationally. So I would suggest using that, particularly Telegram. There are also other tools, a VPN, which is called a virtual private network. This is something that helps to ensure that your internet connection is secure. I understand that not every country allows their citizens to use a virtual private network, but where you can use it, you definitely want to use it. And of course, if you're in a country where you cannot use it, then don't, because you could only attract attention by using a VPN in an environment where the government does not want their citizens doing that. So using multi-factor authentication is really important to be able to do. So when you're logging into your email, you want to ensure that your email is as secure as possible, that you have a long password. I would say a password of at least 18 characters. I know that may seem like a lot, but you do want to have longer passwords so that people just cannot access your accounts easily. But the other thing that you want to have in addition to that long password is you want to have multi-factor authentication enabled, so that when someone does try it, so that when you are logging into your account or when someone else tries to log into your account, you know that this is happening in real time. I'll give you another example. I was working with someone and she knew that someone was trying to get into her Facebook account simply because the multi-factor authentication was enabled. And so she got a response right away that let her know that someone was trying to get into her account. That is real-time defense. And that's exactly what you want. So you don't want to find out later that someone got into your account. You want to know right away if someone is even attempting to get in. And that can help you to ensure security in real time. You also want to be mindful of the information that is out there about you. So, holding on and focusing on privacy. Where is your information and is it secure? it's safe to say that if you give your information to a healthcare provider, that they're not, that you're not, quote unquote, responsible for that direct safety and security, right? We just have to trust that that healthcare provider is going to keep that information safe. But we're also, though, responsible for if we happen to, how we access that information, how we secure that information. If we receive test results or any information on a piece of paper that it's printed out, then how are we going to keep that piece of paper safe? That's really important. If we're accessing any information online about ourselves and it's secure in a secure portal, how are we keeping that safe? So again, enabling multi-factor authentication across all accounts that we use is extremely important. So not just our email, but our healthcare and any account that we have that requires us to log in. For online harassment, which I know is a big thing, all the security parameters that we're talking about here can be applied to every single social media platform. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. VPN, multi-factor authentication, strong password. But if there happens to be anything that happens, you receive a threat, you see any activity that seems odd, go ahead and report it. These companies there is more and more accountability around how they're responding, even though it's not good enough yet. There is more accountability, and the more information that they have, I think that helps them to even be able to allocate funding to be able to support any type of support that's needed for the people that are using their platform. And then, I would say we had a brief survey that we sent out, and someone wrote in one of the responses, partnerships to avoid and counterattacks. And so I don't know if that person's here, but I'd be curious to know what you meant by partnerships to avoid. In my experience, a lot of times that means partners that are not aligned with your values as an organization. A lot of times it could mean law enforcement. So it can mean different things. But I would say that, strong partnerships, particularly ones that you can establish any type of like memorandum of understanding, those can be great partnerships for you to be able to utilize. A lot of times I've seen that with civil society, where two organizations that are working close together, particularly if they want to share information or share data, they have some sort of agreement that's in place. And if you're working with an organization where there is not an opportunity for agreement, one, you can look for that, or two, maybe that can be a reason maybe to not partner with them. But that doesn't mean don't do it, right? Because I think partnership is the way that we continue to advance what we're trying to do. That's how we advance our cause. So I think depending on how that statement was meant, it can vary. But what I would say is continue to build strong relationships where you can, and just be mindful of any relationships that don't seem to be serving you and what your organization is trying to do. And as far as counterattacks, I'll pause here after this point. I think this was a really an interesting point that someone made. If something happens and you have an attacker that comes to you, whether that attacker is an actual hacker, so they're actually gaining access to your information online, number one, or two, it's something that's happening in person. Maybe there's someone that you're in your community that's doing something that they should not be doing, or they're causing harm to your community in some way. I think counterattacks can be challenging to do depending on what exactly you mean by that, number one, and two, if there is a law against it. So I have, as a security leader, I do know that there are times where if a hacker is hacking an organization, that if there's a hacker working in that organization, the hacker wants to hack back. But that isn't necessarily going to be the case with a civil society organization. And even if it happened, like even if any of you had someone who had those skill sets that could do it, you still want to be mindful of not breaking the law, because just because they were able to do it to your organization doesn't mean that there wouldn't be repercussions if you did it back. Also, if you did it, if you did something back in response to someone causing harm to you or your organization, you could also leave yourself up vulnerably for them to actually create more harm. So, and you not realizing that. So I just wanted to address that as well. So just be very, very mindful of that.
Thank you. A whole lot of other questions or comments have come down. Let me share them with you.
Okay.
And one is basically you addressed the WhatsApp for one thing, but the question was more generic on the everything now on the cloud. What are the relative risks of the main common platforms we use? WhatsApp, Teams, Signal, Zoom, Dropbox. And then another comment, which sort of I have personally also experienced it, came about the Telegram, that it deletes it erases the messages conversation after seconds, and how to keep tracking. Well, sort of that is one of the safety issues that our organization while back experienced. So that's a sort of two combined comments, and then added to that but VPN adds strains on one's bandwidth, and doesn't that also create its own problems? So let's just sort of focus on these for right now, and then I have a larger question on the hacking of the emails and so on.
Okay. So the cloud, using WhatsApp, Teams, Zoom. So what I'll say is if you're doing a few things, one, if your device is secure, so we haven't talked about device security, so ensuring that you have a lock on your device. So every single time you come to your device and you turn your device on, or you log into your device, you're putting in a code. You're enabling encryption when you do that. So just having that enabled means your device is encrypted, which is good. If you're using a VPN, meaning a virtual private network, that'll also be very helpful to increase security of your internet connection, because that too now is encrypted as well. So when you're doing those things, when you're using WhatsApp, the challenge with the cloud is even when you're taking a multi approach to security, which is really multi-layered approach, which is really what we're talking about here. WhatsApp in itself is just, I would say, not secure. So I would not want you to be using WhatsApp. Again, I know this is super challenging because I know so many organizations use it, but I would encourage a different tool, because at the end of the day, I do think other tools are more secure. So you decide and take a risk-based approach on what you think is most important for your organization. And sometimes what that means is when you take a risk-based approach, you may say, well, so many in our community are using WhatsApp. We're not in a position to switch to another application right now. Then you're making a risk-based decision to say, you know what, we know that WhatsApp may not be as secure, but because we have so many people that are using it, we just can't switch at the moment. But what you can do is you can make a plan to switch in the future, right? After you've taken some time to educate your community, after you've taken some time to talk to them about why you're making this move, and then you can do it. You can decide on another tool, and then you can test it and make sure it works for you. When it comes to Zoom and Teams, and Zoom has done a lot to increase their security. Teams is a Microsoft tool. So when I think that nothing is 100% as well. I think that we've seen way more vulnerabilities with WhatsApp, but the truth is, there are recent incidents that we saw with Microsoft, and that was just in the past couple of months. So I think that one of the things we have to fully understand is that nothing is 100%. And as we continue to use these tools, we have to, I think no matter what we use, we eventually have to trust some tool. Right now, I do recommend for people to use Zoom. Part of that is because it's hard to find another alternative that fully meets some of the requirements that people have, again, just to be able to do all the things they need to do on Zoom. Because Zoom provides so many different options to be able to support their community. One of the things that I've been working with another organization on is finding an alternative to Microsoft so that they wouldn't be using Teams, they wouldn't be using SharePoint, and they wouldn't be in that cloud environment. Google is another tool that I've seen a lot of civil society organizations use. However, I know that many civil society organizations want to move away from Google. One of the options that I've recommended is Proton. Some of you are probably familiar with that, particularly in the EU. It's based out of Switzerland. Proton has expanded to create a workspace. So it's not just email anymore. There is a workspace there. I don't know how expensive that is. I think that that could be one of the challenges as well as how much does it cost to be able to use these tools, where Google may be more maybe more economically friendly. Again, these are all risks and decisions that you'll have to decide eventually. But at the end of the day, nothing is 100% secure. That, though, is the exact reason why everything that we do, we want to ensure is as secure as possible as well. But the truth is, we also have to, that everything isn't always 100%. That's why I said, as much as you can, have an 18-character password that's alphanumeric, meaning you have uppercase, lowercase letters, and you have signals and you have numbers. Because the more ways that we can focus on increasing our own security from like an in-depth approach, what we call security in-depth, where we're doing it from multiple perspectives, the more secure we'll be. So
There's a concern about emails being hacked. So I would venture to say that probably all the issues you just spoke about, authentication and so on and so forth, would apply to that. But is there something more specific that you might want to suggest about emails being in the domain, but there's a concern about those emails being hacked?
Yeah, so email security is huge. If wherever you are, whatever tool that you're using, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Proton, or whether it's Gmail, if you can look at the settings and increase your security setting for your email, which I think is really important to do. Now, let's say for whatever reason you cannot do that with your the provider that you're using. It's possible that whoever you're doing your hosting with, particularly you're hosting with your you're hosting with your website, that you can purchase an increased email security from them, particularly if you have your email through them. And you can purchase increased email security, which can help support the security of your email. It's a difficult option, particularly depending on the type of budget you have, but it's an important thing to do. It will help you to flag phishing emails earlier. It'll help you to flag any email addresses that aren't coming through as secure or that can't seem to be validated in some way. And then outside of that, just being mindful of all the email that comes in is going to be just really important to do. Not clicking on every single one, moving something to your spam folder, and just trusting that if it's really important that someone will follow up and let you know. If you do happen to receive an email, and let's say it is a phishing email, let's say it's coming from one of your colleagues, maybe your boss, or someone on your team, if you do think that it's fake, or if it's asking you to do something that that person would never ask you to do, or at least not in that particular way, then don't respond to that email. Just go to them directly and ask them, did you send me this email? That's going to be the best way to find out. And the reason why I'm saying this is because what we've seen, and this is in not just civil society, but multiple industries, is that someone will receive an invoice and will say, hey, can you pay this? And then that invoice is being paid, but that was from an attacker, what we call a hacker or an attacker, that actually wasn't from the person in the organization who you thought it was from. And so just being mindful and pausing is so important. And I'll tell you that in the past, let's see, I would say this year, I was going to say the past 3 or 6 months, but now it's been a full year now in December. So the past 12 months, I've seen more increases in phishing emails than I have the last 3 years. And a lot of that is because it's enabled by AI. The speed that we can start to see more emails that are not secure is increasing. So we really have to, ourselves as individuals, we have to be that first line of defense that is willing to pause, that is willing to ask a question to the person who's sending the email before we respond, and doing that not through that email, because if you respond to that email, you're just going to get on the other side whoever sent that email. So you want to pause and you want to find another avenue, maybe text, or just pick up the phone and call them to address whatever it is that they sent you. So
Thank you. I'm cognizant of time, so I have two more audience responses that have come. So one is simply just a comment that at a recent UN meeting, several virtual hybrid side events, especially those focused on gender issues, were Zoom bombed by someone broadcasting porn in the middle of the events. The UN itself wouldn't allow meeting organizer to make the events organization only, so they were especially vulnerable. So that is sort of a comment to know how things can get. And then someone thank you, Jessica, for these concrete security actions based on NGOs' missions and the vulnerable communities they serve, children, women, LGBTQ, and people and others. What crisis response and prevention plans should be prioritized today to protect their rights, health, and financial data in real life emergencies?
Okay. Yeah, so this is a great question, and this is now getting into much more kind of formalized ways of applying cybersecurity to an organization. And this is important because there's been a upgraded or an updated EU regulation that is focused on helping to ensure that let's say critical infrastructure, meaning organizations and companies in particular industries, energy, healthcare, power, and any associated organizations, which could very much be civil society, if you're working closely with any of these organizations, that you are focusing on increased security. And so what that looks like from that organizational perspective is to have some type of cyber risk management in place. And what that means is that you're using probably some sort of cybersecurity framework that's helping you to better understand security within your organization. You're also going to be focused on things like business continuity, which means if you have something, let's say a process, or you have a technology in your business that goes down, or your organization that goes down, how do you respond to that so that your organization can continue to thrive and operate? Being able to plan for those things is extremely important. And you know this, right? Like if you know, all of you know what is something that you offer that is extremely important, and you also know what it takes to offer that service. Or maybe it's just an offering that you have for the community. If that goes down, then how are you going to operate? Having those types of plans in place is really, really important. So it could be something like, using the use of WhatsApp. If you're using WhatsApp and it goes down and it's no longer available, then what would you do in order to be able to reach out to your community? That alone could be a good enough reason to transition out of WhatsApp and then start using another tool and have that there. But still, you would still need to have a plan and a backup in case that new tool also was not available. It's important that as a leader of a nonprofit and that you understand that you have accountability for security, right? Just like with everything else as a leader of the organization. So you do have to look at it in that way, that you are accountable to your community and to your board on how you respond to cybersecurity, and that you are showing that you're taking these concerns in a real way and that you're responding in real time. Having some sort of reporting is also really important. So there should be some sort of tracking of incidents that are taking place, whether they're cyber incidents or whether they're physical incidents or organizational incidents, process incidents, technology-related incidents, anything that is causing a disruption to your business. And then you also want to track what is any losses that happen. A lot of times when a cyber incident happens, there is a financial loss. Simply, the loss can be the downtime of not working. And so being able to track that information is important as well. And then your supply chain. One of the reasons why civil society organizations are a focus for this updated EU regulation around improving cybersecurity and improving the baseline of cybersecurity across Europe is because at the end of the day, you're part of their supply chain, meaning that you work with them on some level. They provide you perhaps funding, or you're working with them on maybe on a data project, as you mentioned in the question. And so protecting that data, whether it's information about health or it's information about children and youth, having strong ways to protect that information is extremely important. And part of that is who has access to that data. And so you'll have to ensure that your systems are secure. You'll have to ensure that only the right people are accessing that data and even have access to that data, that it's not someplace in a location where anyone can just access on your internet and your intranet, meaning you're inside your organization. And then you should also be vetting your partners as well. So many of you have probably experienced some form of supply chain risk questionnaire that you have to go through in order to work with an organization, even if they're simply providing a donation to your organization. On some level, you should be also having or other organizations that you work with go through something similar. It doesn't have to be as intense, of course, but going through something like this speaks to the security of your organization and helps to increase security across that supply chain, which is what we call it. So those are some key things that you can do. Another really important thing, which everyone should just be doing, is any type of awareness training for your teams. That should be something that's mandatory at the very least annually, but doing something quarterly, particularly if there isn't a formal program in place, is a great thing to do and a great place to start to support your team and your community in being safe.
Thank you, Jessica. You're so informative. This is lovely. Thank you. I basically I want to just share one example of our situation that we also are a nonprofit, and we use a platform that we receive donation through that. And we realized that the threshold of the donation was being experimented by fraudulent activities. And this took time to address. It took a lot of work back and forth for the platform that we use to realize that these were hackers and they were trying different people's credit cards with small amounts to see whether they can get by and then do whatever they wanted to do with it. And they were testing the people's credit cards that they have stolen, and they were using that to pretend that they were making donations to our organization. So our counter to that, not only was that we put that platform on notice that this is what's happening, watch out. And when they realized that we caught that very quickly, they refunded because it was costing us. So they refunded the funds back to us, and we agreed to change the threshold to a much higher. Let's say it didn't have a dollar figure on it, but I think we put it up to $25. So the $25 checking to see if the credit card can be used has stopped a lot of those kinds of activities. That just personal experience that we have had. There is a question from Jamie that says, is there a template online security policy protocol for NGOs that can be shared? If so, there is an NGO inbox.net that we can use, put it there. I don't know whether such a template exists, does it?
Well, I'm not sure of one that exists, but what we can share is what some of the expectations are coming out of this EU directive, because the truth is, when you're putting together a policy, you're basically putting together not just what you know is important for your cyber program, but you're putting together a policy that you actually have to execute. So I would say first, if you're anything that goes into your policy, you actually have to be able to execute that. You have to have the resources to do that, number one. But then I would also say is some of the things that I just mentioned were literally from the regulation, the new EU regulation. So I know that we can send that to you so that you have it, and that can be maybe a good guideline for you in thinking about a policy to create. But again, if you put it into a policy, that means that you're committed to executing it. So as I'm going through some of the comments, I'm seeing that money and having a budget is a bit of a concern. So you're looking for opportunities where it may not cost anything. Then you're going to want to refer to those first set of options that I provided to you, which is about multi-factor authentication and ensuring your security and privacy settings are set for all of your accounts. A lot of using a VPN, which does have a small budget to it, as well as a password manager, a small budget, but all of those can be very, very helpful for anyone who's just starting to get their cyber program up and going that doesn't have a large budget.
The once again, thank you. And is there something you wanted to add on? Because I thought that we somehow need to also figure out that how can we sort of empower digital literacy program to bridge the digital divide while keeping women safe online?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess maybe the first thing I'll say is I see one question here around Telegram, erases messages after message conversations after seconds and how to keep tracking. That should be a setting in Telegram. So I don't believe that they do it for all of their messages. You have to enable that setting. So go into your settings in Telegram, and it's possible that there's a way that you can go into settings that improves or that connects to all of your messages, and you can check those settings and you can enable it or not. And then you may be able to go into every single individual conversation and then enable it or disable it from there. I know that WhatsApp is like that, Signal is like that. So you just want to every app is different, but you should be able to have that choice within Telegram.
Can
And
I
then,
raise an issue with this? And that is, it's sort of, again, through our work, we experienced the fact that we 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 were telling others as a part of the digital hygiene to clear off the messages, do not hold on to the messages long, because if your phone gets confiscated, the access to all that information is there. So you want to have the setting as such that indeed is going to keep your devices clean. So I think perhaps that should be, we experience it. We in our own work and training experienced is that people's phone, when taken, all the information about so many other people was exposed.
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think it's a very good thing to have your messages delete after a certain period of time. You can, and I believe there are options for that too. So do you want it to delete after, like immediately after 2 hours, after 8 hours, after 24 hours, or maybe, there's a period longer than that. But this is you bring up a great point, Manaz, because for everyone here, personally and professionally, there's something called data deletion, right? Part of having a cyber policy is also on some level having and also a privacy policy is having a data deletion policy, because we have to know how long should we even keep certain data. And a lot of times, though we may be using our like our messages, our like WhatsApp and Telegram for specific uses, that's not the hub of where we're actually storing data. So there really shouldn't be a need for us to keep that data for very, very long. It should be a way for us to have quick conversations, to maybe keep people up to date about things. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that there could be a number of reasons why we would want to save that data. But at the end of the day, I think a question that we have to ask ourselves is what really is most important, and what is the harm also that could happen if we kept this data. The thing about the message platforms is that in real time exposes the community, right? So, you could have a large community of people, but then in those messages, you have names, you have numbers, and then now you have data that can be utilized. So thinking about how we can limit that footprint of data is really, really important, particularly for those that it could cause harm to.
Thank you.
So I know that there was a question about VPN. Does a VPN add strain to one's bandwidth? I would say no. What a VPN can do is it can make it difficult to have video conversations sometimes. It can make it difficult to watch videos or particularly to play games if anyone is a gamer. So you want to be mindful about how you use the VPN, but it technically shouldn't be a strain on the bandwidth. I'd like to think it actually can help your bandwidth, it does interfere with certain videos, so you just may have to be mindful of that.
I think we wanted to sort of, is there any last minute thing that you might want to share with the audience as we're coming to the time? And I want to pass this to Gisela.
I think, we're all here today focused on security, which is so incredibly important. I think that, to your point in your question, Manaz, about focusing on empowering digital literacy programs and how do we do that in keeping women's and all individuals safe online. I would say that we are now in an AI-enabled world. I think that civil society has really kind of taken a step back from AI to really, and I am with you there because I've done the same thing. And I think we have to take time to understand AI. We have to learn it. Then we have to understand how we can actually use it to help us. Because I think that there are so many things that are on the agenda for civil society to do that can really move so much more quickly if we are using AI. So, and again, you don't have to input personal data in order to be able to use it. But one of my concerns is that with the speed of AI, those that don't have access right now to technology or have limited access or that aren't using technology because of security concerns, the speed of technology could leave those individuals further behind. So I don't think the answer is to run away from AI. I think we have to learn how to embrace it, but in a way that's comfortable for us. And then we want to continue to bring people along so that they are continuing to learn and to feel confident with the speed of technology and how it's changing, but how they can also stay safe. So all of the things that we talked about today, want to be able to share it with them so that they too can feel confident and safe online.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And one last item for both Giselle and you, that you mentioned the policy, the EU policy. If there is a link for that, we might want to put it in the chat so everybody can access it. Otherwise, I think if the participants have their registration information with Dianova, they might be able to get that link. Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful informing session, Gisela.
Thank you very much. It's been so interesting. Thank you for this truly engaging discussion. Today, we have explored the importance of holistic security, which is a concept that is very essential for our organization, and I think not very famous, and we haven't talked that much, which is great. The communities we serve, we touch on a very wide range of issues and even heard some practical ideas on how to strengthen safety in our digital and offline environments. We also heard examples of how vulnerable online spaces can be in recent virtual and hybrid events, as you mentioned in the chat, and Magnus, as Jamie mentioned, especially those addressing gender-related issues. Several sessions were disrupted by Zoom bombing and explicit content due to limited security controls. And this incident reminds us that NGOs working to protect communities and human rights must remain vigilant and ensure that technology and security work in our favor. We know that many topics were open today, which is why it will be very valuable to learn which areas you would like us to explore more deeply in the future. So if you have this question in the chat, if you want to write it down, what is your interest for the next webinar would be very nice. And we are deeply grateful to our panelists. It has been a pleasure to have you with us, Jessica, Manaz. I feel honored to share this space with you. Our thanks as well to the Dianova team, to our interpreter, Patrick, and to all of you in the audience. Thank you for being here, your participation, and for your commitment to this work. Please stay connected with us for what's coming next in 2026. Next year, we look forward to continue this journey together. And as we close the year, we wish you all of you a very nice holiday season. May it be restful, safe, and meaningful for each of you and your community. Thank you very much and have a lovely day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Mhm.